You're staring at your bank account on payday. Again. The number is bigger than most people see in a month, and somehow, by the 18th, you're back to checking before you swipe. You're not broke. You're something worse. You're profitable to someone else. Because here's what they don't tell you when you negotiate that salary. When you move from 40,000 to 60, then 80, that number goes up. Your options don't. Every raise you get comes with an invoice attached, and you never see it until you've already signed. Let me show you what I mean. When you made 40,000, you rented the apartment you could afford, drove the car that made sense, bought the groceries on sale, not because you wanted to, because the math forced you. Then you got the promotion, 60,000, 80,000. Suddenly the math changes. The apartment that made sense at 40 feels embarrassing at 80. The car starts looking tired. Your colleagues aren't shopping sales. So you adjust. New place, new zip code. Car payment that isn't insane, just reasonable for someone at your level. You're not splurging, you're matching. And that's the trap. Because your lifestyle didn't inflate, it indexed. It indexed to your income bracket. And income brackets come with mandatory expenses that don't feel mandatory. They feel obvious. Nobody tells you to spend more. The environment does it for you. Your coworkers expense lunch, so you do. They vacation in Tulum, so you're priced into Tulum. They lease, so buying feels almost reckless. You're not keeping up with the Joneses, you're keeping up with your tax bracket. And here's the part that stings. That discretionary income you thought you'd have at 80,000, it disappeared into non-negotiable costs that didn't exist at 40. Childcare in the right district, the gym everyone uses for networking, drinks you can't skip because they're actually meetings, the subscriptions that aren't optional if you want to stay fluent in your industry. You're not spending foolishly, you're spending correctly, for someone in your position. But here's what nobody mapped out for you. At 40,000, 70% of your income was spoken for. Rent, food, transit, basics. At 80,000, it's 80%. You doubled your income, and somehow you have less room to breathe. Because the operating costs of being an $80,000 person are double the operating costs of being a $40,000 person, and nobody issued you a manual. The system isn't broken, it's designed. Every income level has a cost of entry, and that cost rises faster than the income does. You're not failing at budgeting, you're succeeding at being exactly where they need you. Productive, stable, just uncomfortable enough to keep showing up. Let me tell you what really happens when you make more money. Your margin doesn't grow, your obligations do. At 40,000, you owed rent and groceries. At 80, you owe rent and groceries and the image of someone who makes 80. And that image has a price. It's the reason you can't wear the same jacket 2 years running, can't show up to the work trip with the budget suitcase, can't admit you're staying home for Thanksgiving because flights are obscene. You're paying to look like you're not worried about money, which costs exactly enough to make sure you're always worried about money. And the brutal truth? Most of the people around you are doing the same thing. They just hide it better. That coworker who always picks up the check? Rotating credit cards. The one with the new Tesla? Lease they can't break. The VP who just bought in the hot neighborhood? A mortgage that makes their jaw tight at night. Everyone's performing success at the edge of their means, and you're all grading each other on the performance. Here's the shift that changes it. Your paycheck doesn't feel like enough because you're not asking it to cover your life. You're asking it to cover your position. And your position is expensive. It requires a specific address, a specific presentation, a specific level of available liquidity to prove you belong in rooms that actually don't pay you to be there. You're funding your own credibility, and credibility is a subscription service with annual increases. The people who break out of this aren't the ones who make more. They're the ones who stop indexing. They pick one part of the performance and they quit it. Maybe it's the car. Maybe it's the neighborhood. Maybe it's the vacations that exist entirely for the photo. They find the expense that's purely about signaling and they amputate it. And then they take that margin and they point it somewhere that doesn't evaporate. Not because they're frugal, because they realized the game. The game is simple. Make you earn just enough to look like you're winning, but never enough to stop playing. Your paycheck feels small because it's covering two lives, the one you live and the one you're supposed to look like you live. And the gap between those two is where your money goes to die. Most people spend 30 years trying to close that gap, chasing the income that finally feels like enough. It doesn't come, because enough isn't a number, it's a position, and every position has a cost that rises to meet it. You're not bad with money, you're just playing a game where the house sets the minimum bet every time you win.